Mr. Secretary, on January 6, 2021, rioters and looters attacked federal law enforcement officials, vandalized and destroyed federal government property, and caused an estimated $2.7 billion in damages right here at the Capitol. Would you have sent the National Guard and the Marines in on that day?
Well, unfortunately, President Trump requested the National Guard in advance, and that was...
It took him quite a long time. I'm asking you, as Secretary of Defense, would you have sent in the National Guard and the Marines on that day? We had 140 Capitol Police officers injured. One died the next day. Would you have sent in the National Guard and the Marines?
As I said, President Trump directed National Guard to be there in advance.
And I think you can look at the record of how long it actually took for him to actually send them in. But it's good to hear that it sounds like you would have sent in the National Guard and the Marines on that day in which the insurrection was taking place right here at the Capitol. Mr. Secretary, during your confirmation hearing, you failed to deny the conclusion that you would carry out an order to shoot protesters in the legs. So let me be direct. Given what we are seeing across the country right now, would you carry out or issue an order by the President for our military to fire upon protesters actively engaging in their civil right to exercise free speech, their First Amendment rights? Would you give that order from the President?
I assume you're insinuating what's going on in Los Angeles, and I wouldn't.
Not just Los Angeles. If we take a look at protests throughout the country, it's a simple question. If directed by the President, would you order our military to fire upon protesters? Simple yes or no.
Ma'am, we have, as you know, and as this committee knows, we have standard rules of engagement that are in place that give guidance to our troops, and they abide by them.
I'm asking what you would do. Again, you said you serve at the pleasure of the President. Is that not true?
I do serve at the pleasure.
So if the President told you to shoot people in the legs, would you do so? Now, you failed to answer this question as well in your confirmation hearing when asked by members of the Senate.
Because I refuse to accept a false hypothetical that's attempting to put me in a corner and make it look like a representation.
At a time when we have more Marines and National Guard in Los Angeles than we do in Syria and Iran alone, I don't think this is a hypothetical. This is an actual situation that we are dealing with right now. So again, I will ask the question in the last 14 seconds I have. Would you order our military to shoot at their fellow countrymen, if ordered by the President?
I think it's interesting that for 4 years, insurrection was the left's favorite word.
I think we know your answer. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
In LA.
What happened in this hearing is not just a theater. It was Congresswoman Jill Tokuda drilling Pete Hegseth into the heart of two defining issues: conflict of interest at the highest levels of national security and the limits of presidential power over the U.S. military. But the moment that crystallizes the stakes is when she asks the question he desperately tries not to answer. If the President ordered you to fire on American protesters, would you comply? That is the line. That is the test of democratic integrity, the test of whether military leaders understand that their duty is to the Constitution, not the whims of a single president.
Mr. Secretary, did you invite Elon Musk for a briefing on war plans with China to the Pentagon? Yes or no is simple.
There's been a lot of hyperbole and incorrect reporting around that situation, but we did invite Elon over to come talk to us generally, but there was no war plans being discussed.
Okay, so whose idea was it to invite him to the Pentagon for a briefing? You mentioned you served at the pleasure of the President. Was it the President's will to have him come and be briefed?
Well, as you know, at that time, Elon Musk was leading up DOGE efforts, and we've taken a great investment in DOGE at DOD, and so getting his input on how we make DOD more efficient makes a great deal of sense.
Okay, but don't you think it's a conflict of interest for the world's richest man? Many of the contracts that the DOD is engaged in, billions of dollars of contracts going to his company, and he is, as to your point, was leading DOGE, which was involved in cutting hundreds of contracts, but also becoming intimately aware of the platforms and the requirements that would be given out for new contracts. Did you not think it was a conflict of interest to invite someone with financial interests into the Pentagon to have firsthand knowledge of what they could then bid on for their own, enrichment?
Ma'am, it was just an informal discussion, but I'll tell you, anyone that knows our Defense Department knows we show no preference to any company other than what your capabilities are, and we're grateful for the places where his companies benefit our national defense.
So for a $280 million donation, the world's richest man with companies intimately linked and involved in billion-dollar contracts with the Department of Defense gain access into the Pentagon. So would you say that any company right now that has multi-billion-dollar contracts with the Department of Defense has access to the Pentagon right now? 1-hour briefings with you personally?
On the regular basis, I meet with many people and many different companies and many different aspects of our defense industrial base to ensure we have the best possible capabilities. It would be imprudent to do
Well, I'm
otherwise.
sure for an investment of $280 million, Elon's investors are quite happy that it's come out into the billions.
These aren't abstract debates. They decide whether our democracy is governed by ethics, accountability, and the rule of law, or by personal loyalty and unchecked power. Tokuda begins with a question that sounds simple on the surface. Why was Elon Musk invited into the Pentagon for a briefing? But under that question sits a much larger concern. When the world's richest man, someone whose companies hold billions of dollars in defense contracts and whose decisions directly influence national security systems, is invited inside the Pentagon for private discussions, that raises serious ethical red flags. It's not about personalities, it's about first principles. Government procurement is supposed to be competitive, transparent, and insulated from favoritism. The moment a contractor with enormous financial interest is given access to sensitive conversations that could shape future contracts, the lines between national interest and private profit begin to blur. Tokuda is calling out that tension. She's pressing the secretary on whether he understands how dangerous it is when someone who stands to benefit financially is allowed inside the room where the decisions are being shaped. And the fact that her questions are met with vague reassurances rather than direct acknowledgement of the conflict is part of what makes this exchange so important. She isn't asking because she's looking for drama. She's asking because the integrity of the defense procurement system depends on a clean wall between contractors and the decisions that award them work. Then Tokuda pivots sharply to January 6th. And this is where her questioning becomes even more consequential. January 6th wasn't just a riot, it was an attack on the peaceful transfer of power, and it exposed dangerous delays and hesitations in deploying the National Guard. Her question isn't about relitigating that day, it's about establishing a baseline for judgment. Would this secretary, under pressure, uphold his duty to protect democracy, or would he defer to political calculations or presidential pressure? Tokuda isn't throwing a hypothetical for theatrics. She's doing what congressional oversight is supposed to do, force officials to state clearly whether they will protect civil liberties, respect lawful limits on force, and reject illegal or immoral orders. The secretary's refusal to give a straight answer speaks volumes. In a moment when protests across the country are straining tensions between government authority and civilian rights, clarity matters. Americans deserve to know whether leaders in charge of the military understand that the First Amendment is not optional, that dissent is not a threat to be neutralized by force, and that the use of the military against civilians is one of the gravest decisions any administration could contemplate. Tokuda's questioning also reminds viewers of something many people forget. Military personnel do not swear loyalty to a president, they swear loyalty to the Constitution. And a president cannot legally order the military to fire on civilians exercising constitutional rights. The refusal to say this clearly, in public, under oath, isn't just evasive, it's dangerous. It suggests a willingness to follow orders first and question legality second, which is precisely why congressional oversight exists. What Tokuda did here is essential in a healthy democracy. She exposed tensions that many people never see, clarified the boundaries between civilian authority and military obedience, and highlighted the ethical vulnerabilities that arise when wealth, influence, and political power collide within national security institutions. If you believe in transparency, accountability, and guardrails that protect our democracy from abuses of power, then moments like this matter. They are how we prevent the normalization of ideas that once would have been unthinkable, from using contractors as insiders to deploying military force against protesters. If you want to stay engaged, follow hearings like this, read the transcripts, support leaders who ask the hard questions rather than those who hide behind vague answers, and most importantly, speak up, because silence is the only environment in which abuses of power thrive.